Tonight, as the world grows quiet around you, let your mind drift toward a place where dreams and wonder meet, where curiosity opens hidden doors, and every heartbeat echoes through a land of impossible beauty. Follow the whisper of a white rabbit and step gently beyond the edge of reason into a dream that has lived for centuries. The timeless journey of Alice in Wonderland. The afternoon sun lay warm upon the grassy riverbank, and Alice sat beside her sister, feeling terribly bored. Her sister was reading a book with no pictures, no talking creatures, not even a single interesting adventure. Alice sighed. What's the use of a book, she thought, without pictures or conversation? The air was drowsy and golden. The hum of bees floated through the meadow, and the heat made Alice's eyelids grow heavy. She wondered lazily if it would be worth the effort to get up and pick some daisies for a chain, but even that seemed too much work. Just as she was about to close her eyes, something quite curious happened. A white rabbit with bright pink eyes ran swiftly past her. There was nothing too strange about seeing a rabbit, but this rabbit was different. It wore a little waistcoat, and as it hurried by, it said aloud, oh dear, I shall be late." Alice blinked. Talking rabbits were not something one saw every day, and when the rabbit took a pocket watch out of its waistcoat, looked at it anxiously, and then dashed off again, Alice's curiosity burst awake like a spark. She leapt to her feet, her boredom forgotten. Without thinking even for a moment, she ran after it. Across the field, through the tall grass, and just in time to see it vanish down a large rabbit hole beneath a hedge. Alice hesitated only a heartbeat, and then, driven by pure wonder, she stooped down and followed it in. The moment Alice stepped forward, the ground gave way beneath her feet, and she found herself falling, slowly, silently, through a deep, dark tunnel. At first it felt like sliding down a long well. The sides were lined with shelves and cupboards, maps pinned to the walls, and glass jars filled with strange labels. Alice reached out as she passed one of the shelves and picked up a jar marked orange marmalade. It was empty, to her disappointment, but being a thoughtful girl, she didn't want to drop it for fear it might hit someone below. So, as she drifted downward, she carefully placed it into one of the cupboards. The fall went on and on. It was so slow, or perhaps the hole was so deep, that she had plenty of time to think. She began to wonder where she might be going, and whether she would ever stop falling. "This is a very long way down," she said aloud to herself. "I wonder how many miles I've fallen by now. Perhaps I'm already near the center of the earth. Let's see, that would be about 4,000 miles down, I think." Alice had learned things like that in school, and though there was no one there to listen, she liked saying them out loud. "Yes, that must be about right," she continued, nodding wisely. But then, what about longitude and latitude? She had no idea what either word meant, but they sounded grand and clever, and she liked the way they rolled off her tongue. Down, down, down. Still falling, still dreaming, she began to imagine what might happen if she fell right through the world. Perhaps she would come out on the other side, among people who walked upside down. "The antipathies, I think they're called," she murmured, then frowned. "No, that doesn't sound quite right. I'll have to ask them what their country is called. Please, ma'am, is this New Zealand or Australia?" The thought of saying that, while curtsying mid-air, made her giggle. She wondered if she could actually manage a curtsy while falling through space. "What an ignorant little girl she'll think me," Alice said, laughing softly, but perhaps the name will be written up somewhere. Still she fell, through cool air and endless dark. There was nothing to do but think and talk to herself. Dinah will miss me tonight, I suppose, she said. I hope they remember her saucer of milk at tea time. Dinah was her beloved cat. My dear Dinah, I wish you were down here with me. There's no mice in the air, I'm afraid. But we could chase. She was beginning to feel sleepy again, her voice drifting into a dream, when suddenly, thump, thump, she landed softly on a heap of dry leaves and twigs. The fall was over. Alice sat up at once, brushing off her dress. She wasn't hurt at all. Above her, it was pitch black, but ahead, she could see a long passage stretching forward. And there, hurrying along, was the white rabbit, still muttering, "Oh, my ears and whiskers, how late it's getting." Without a thought, Alice sprang to her feet and ran after it. Alice dashed after the white rabbit, her footsteps echoing softly along the narrow passage. The air was cool and still, and the only sound was the faint patter of her shoes on the smooth floor. She turned a sharp corner, but the rabbit was gone. Instead, she found herself standing in a long, low hall, lit by a row of golden lamps hanging from the ceiling. Their light shimmered on the polished walls and glimmered across the floor like sunlight dancing on water. Around her were many doors, doors of every shape and size, but each one was locked. Alice tried them one by one, going all the way down one side of the hall and back again, but not a single door would open. When she reached the center again, feeling puzzled and a little tired, she noticed a small three-legged table made entirely of glass. It stood gleaming under the soft light, and upon it lay a tiny golden key. Her heart gave a hopeful flutter. Surely this must open one of the doors, she thought eagerly. But when she tried the first door, then the second, then the third, the key was either too small or the locks were too large. None of them would open. Disappointed, Alice walked slowly down the hall once more. Then, quite by chance, she noticed a little curtain she hadn't seen before. Behind it was a small door, no taller than 15 inches high. She tried the golden key, and to her delight, it fit perfectly. She knelt down and opened the door. It led into a narrow passage, so small that even a rabbit would have to stoop. But at the end of the passage, Alice saw something that made her eyes sparkle with wonder. A garden, the most beautiful garden she had ever seen. Beds of bright flowers glowed like jewels under the sunlight. Cool fountains splashed in the distance. The air seemed alive with color and fragrance and quiet joy. Oh, how I wish I could be out there, Alice whispered longingly. Among those flowers and fountains, she tried to squeeze through the door, but she couldn't even get her head in. If only I could shut up like a telescope, she thought. I think I could, if only I knew how to begin. She smiled at the thought, for so many strange things had happened already that she was beginning to believe anything might be possible here. Still, she couldn't reach the garden, not yet. So she went back to the glass table, hoping perhaps to find another key or some kind of instruction to help her shrink herself smaller. And this time, to her great surprise, there was something new upon the table. A little glass bottle that certainly hadn't been there before. Around its neck hung a small paper label with the words, "Drink me," beautifully printed in large, fancy letters. Alice stood before the little bottle and read the neat label again. "Drink me." The words sparkled invitingly in the soft light. But Alice was not a foolish girl. "It's all very well to say, 'Drink me,'" she said, "but I must first make sure it's not poison." She had once read several cautionary tales about children who had gotten themselves into dreadful trouble. Some had been burned, some eaten by wild beasts, all because they had ignored simple, sensible rules. So she checked the bottle carefully. It had no skull or crossbones, no warnings at all. The liquid inside looked pleasant and smelled delightful, like fruit, sugar, and something warm. "Well," said Alice finally, "if it isn't marked poison, I suppose it's safe to try." She took a tiny sip. The taste was wonderful, like a mix of cherry tart, custard, pineapple, roast turkey, toffee, and hot buttered toast, all blended together. She smiled, then she drank a little more, and a little more still, until the bottle was empty. Immediately, she felt something curious happening. A strange, light feeling ran through her limbs. Her head seemed to float above her shoulders, and the hall around her began to grow taller and wider. Or rather, she was growing smaller and smaller. "What a curious feeling," she cried. "I must be shutting up like a telescope." Indeed, she was now no more than 10 inches high. Her face brightened. "At last," she said happily. "Now I can fit through the little door into that lovely garden." But she paused for a moment, worried that perhaps she might keep shrinking. "What if I go out altogether, like a candle?" She wondered aloud. She tried to imagine what the flame of a candle looks like after it's blown out. But she couldn't picture it. After waiting a while and finding she didn't shrink any further, she decided to go at once into the garden. But oh, poor Alice! When she reached the little door, she realized she had left the golden key on top of the glass table. She tried to climb one of the table legs, but it was too smooth and slippery. She could see the key glittering above her, so close, yet so far away. Finally, tired and frustrated, the little girl sat down on the floor and began to cry. "Come now, there's no use crying like that," she said to herself sternly. She often gave herself excellent advice, though she rarely followed it. "But there's hardly enough of me left," she sighed, "to make one respectable person." As Alice sat on the floor, her tears beginning to dry, something shiny beneath the glass table caught her eye. It was a small glass box lying on the floor beside her. She crawled closer and opened it. Inside was a tiny round cake, beautifully decorated with currants, and upon it, written in careful letters, were the words, "Eat me." "Well," said Alice, folding her hands, "after drinking from that bottle and coming to no harm, I suppose a bit of cake can't hurt me either. If it makes me grow larger, I can reach the key, and if it makes me smaller, I can go under the door. So either way, I'll get into the garden. It doesn't matter which happens." Feeling quite determined, she took a small bite. Then she placed her hand on top of her head to feel which way she was growing. To the right or to the left, up or down, she wondered aloud. But nothing seemed to happen at first. She stayed exactly the same size. So she shrugged, smiled bravely, and said, "Well, perhaps it will take a little time." Then, feeling quite hungry after all her adventures, she finished the rest of the cake, and as she swallowed the last crumb, the floor, the walls, the lamps, the very air around her began to shift and blur. The ceiling seemed to rise higher and higher. The table shrank to the size of a thimble, and Alice herself felt a rush like a wave lifting her upward. Something was most certainly happening now. The feeling of change swept through Alice's body, like a wave. The walls of the hall were shrinking beneath her feet. Or was she growing taller? Yes, she was growing, and not just a little. Her head brushed the lamps that hung from the ceiling. Her arms stretched longer and longer. Her legs grew until she could no longer see her shoes. And before she quite understood what was happening, Alice had grown taller than the hall itself. "Goodness gracious," she cried, and her voice boomed like an echo in a cave. "What can be happening to me now? Oh, I do wish I had stopped after the first bite of cake." But there was no undoing it now. She was unfolding, stretching up and up, until she must have been 9 feet tall. And still the golden key lay far below. So small, it looked like a speck of dust on the floor. Alice stooped as low as she could, and managed, by the very tips of her fingers, to pick it up. Her heart leapt. Now she could finally reach the little door. She knelt down before it. But alas, she was far too large even to peek through. The garden was there, bright and full of color, so close that she could smell the flowers. But she could not pass through. Poor Alice. She sat down again and began to cry. And this time, her tears were so large and so many that they splashed upon the floor and began to gather around her like a shallow puddle. "Oh, why did I eat that cake?" she sobbed. "I wonder if I'll ever be the right size again. Everything is so confusing here. Yesterday I was just Alice, and now look at me, taller than a house, crying like a baby." Still she wept, until the puddle around her became a great pool, a shimmering lake, made entirely of her own tears. Alice sat beside her great pool of tears, feeling rather foolish and very lonely. After a while she heard, in the distance, the pattering of little feet. She looked up eagerly. It was the White Rabbit, trotting back down the hall in a great hurry, his white gloves in one paw and a fan in the other. He was muttering anxiously to himself, oh dear, the Duchess will be furious if I've kept her waiting. How strange she'll think me without my gloves and fan." Alice felt so desperate for company that when the rabbit passed near her, she began timidly, "Please, sir, if you would be so kind." The rabbit started violently, dropped both his fan and his gloves, and scurried away into the darkness as if he'd seen a ghost. Alice picked up the fan and gloves, feeling a bit amused and a bit sad. "The poor thing must have thought me some sort of giant," she said softly. It was growing quite warm in the hall, so she began to fan herself with the rabbit's fan while she spoke. How curious everything is today. And yesterday, things went on just as usual. Was I the same when I got up this morning? I almost think I must have been changed in the night. But if I'm not the same, then the next question is, who am I? She tried to remember her lessons. Let me see. Was I the same as when I learned multiplication tables? 4 times 5 is 12. 4 times 6 is 13. No, that's not right at all. Oh dear, perhaps I've been turned into Mabel. She began to giggle at the thought. If I am Mabel, then I'll have to go live in that poky little house, and I'll never learn anything nice. And oh, how tiresome that would be. She spoke the words, half laughing, half tearful, and fanned herself faster and faster, until she suddenly noticed something very strange. The hall was rising again, the great table towering above her once more. Her chin was nearer the ground than before, and in a moment, she realized what was happening. She was shrinking. The fan. She was still holding the rabbit's fan. She dropped it at once, and sure enough, she stopped shrinking. Oh, that was close, she said in relief. But now, how shall I ever get out again? Just then, she slipped, and with a gentle splash, fell straight into the pool of salty water she had cried when she was 9 feet tall. Splash! Alice came up gasping for air, her hair clinging to her face and ribbons floating about her like seaweed. For a moment, she forgot everything in the shock of the cold water, but then she remembered where she was. "Oh dear," she said, treading water. "I wish I hadn't cried so much. I suppose I shall be drowned in my own tears." That would be a sad ending to such a curious adventure. But just as she spoke, she heard a splashing sound not far away. She turned and saw something moving in the pool, something alive. At first she thought it might be a walrus or a hippopotamus, but after a moment, she remembered how small she was now and realized it was only a mouse. "Oh, mouse, do you know the way out of this pool?" Alice called politely. "I'm getting quite tired of swimming about here." The mouse looked at her rather suspiciously, but said nothing. "Perhaps it can't understand English," thought Alice. "Maybe it's a French mouse. After all, my sister once had a French lesson book." So she tried again, this time very slowly. "Où est ma chatte?" which was the first sentence in her French book. The mouse gave a terrified leap in the water and seemed to quiver from head to tail. "Oh, I beg your pardon," cried Alice quickly. "I quite forgot you don't like cats." "Like cats?" screamed the mouse, its whiskers trembling with horror. "Would you like cats if you were me?" "Well, perhaps not," said Alice gently. "But I do think Dinah, my cat, is the sweetest creature in the world. She sits by the fire, purring so softly, and catches mice. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean that. Let's not talk about her," said the mouse sharply, as it swam faster toward the far end of the pool. "Let's get to the shore, and I'll tell you my history. That ought to dry us nicely." Alice followed, eager to listen. Behind them, the pool rippled again, and she saw that many other curious creatures had fallen in during her great flood of tears. A duck, a dodo, a lory, and an eaglet, all paddling about awkwardly and looking most uncomfortable. The whole company soon made their way toward the bank, splashing and talking all at once. It was a strange procession, and Alice thought she had never seen such a queer gathering in all her life. They all gathered, dripping and miserable, upon the bank, the duck preening its wet feathers, the dodo shaking itself solemnly, the lory ruffling its wings, and the eaglet sneezing violently every few seconds. Alice stood among them, water streaming from her hair, feeling rather out of place, but very curious. At last, the mouse, who seemed to be a person of some authority among them, cleared its throat and said gravely, "Sit down, all of you, and listen to me. We shall soon be dry enough if we only keep still and hear my history." "Oh, yes, please do," said Alice eagerly. "I'm sure it'll be most interesting." Said the mouse. "This is the driest thing I know." And without further warning, it began a long, tiresome lecture about William the Conqueror and the Norman invasion of England. The creatures sat politely at first, but after a few minutes, their eyes grew dull and their feathers drooped. "It certainly is dry," thought Alice, "but I don't think it's doing us any good." At last, the dodo rose importantly. "The best thing to get us dry," it declared, "is a caucus race." "What is a caucus race?" asked Alice. The dodo looked thoughtful. "The best way to explain it is to do it." So they all stood up and began running about in a large circle, not in any order, not even in the same direction for long. for the dodo would occasionally cry, "Change places," and everyone would rush this way and that, slipping, splashing, and bumping into each other. There was no start and no finish. After half an hour or so, when everyone was thoroughly confused and out of breath, the dodo suddenly called out, "The race is over!" "But who has won?" asked Alice, still panting from the running. "Everybody has won," said the dodo wisely, "and all must have prizes." "But who will give the prizes?" asked another voice. "She shall," said the dodo, pointing at Alice. "Me?" said Alice, quite startled. "I have only a few sweets in my pocket." She handed them out, one to each creature, and everyone cheered as if they had won a great victory. Then the dodo solemnly presented Alice with her own thimble, saying, "We beg your acceptance of this elegant prize." Alice curtsied and accepted it gravely, though she thought it very odd indeed. When the cheering for the caucus race had died away, the creatures settled themselves again in a little circle, still damp, but in far better spirits than before. "Now, you promised to tell your history," said Alice eagerly to the mouse, "and why you dislike cats and dogs." "That is indeed my tale," replied the mouse, turning to her with a grave expression. "And it is a long and a sad one. It is a long tale." "Certainly," said Alice, looking down with wonder at the mouse's tail, which was curled neatly into curious loops upon the ground. "But why do you call it sad?" The mouse frowned. "Foolish child, you are not attending properly. I said tail, not tail." "Oh, I beg your pardon," said Alice. "You speak so oddly sometimes. Perhaps you had better not speak at all," grumbled the mouse. But it began nonetheless, and as it spoke, its words seemed to wind and twist in the air, curling down the page like the shape of its own tail. Fury said to a mouse that he met in the house, "Let us both go to law. I will prosecute you. Come, I'll take no denial. We must have a trial, for really this morning I've nothing to do." Said the mouse to the cur, "Such a trial, dear sir, with no jury or judge, would be wasting our breath. I'll be judge." "I'll be jury," said cunning old Fury. "I'll try the whole cause and condemn you to death." "Now, will you be so good as to listen?" said the mouse, tail twitching with irritation. But Alice was looking about her, trying to find the meaning of the poem, and the poor mouse, thinking itself insulted, gave a sharp squeak and began to swim away in anger. "Oh, please come back," cried Alice. "I didn't mean to offend you." But the mouse only shook its head impatiently. "Let it be," said the lory sternly. "She deserves it, always interrupting." "I didn't mean it," said Alice, almost ready to cry again. "Oh, I wish Dinah were here. She would soon fetch the mouse back again." The mention of Dinah, however, caused quite a disturbance among the little company. "Our family always hated cats," said the eaglet coldly. "And I vote we change the subject." "Let's all go to shore again," said the duck, "for this talk is not at all suited to a wet atmosphere." And with that, they all began to move away, muttering and shaking their feathers. Alice sat alone once more by the watery shore, her heart heavy and her mind spinning. A caucus race and a long tail, they were indeed a queer-looking party that had gathered by the bank of the pool. Birds with dripping feathers, little animals with fur plastered flat against their sides, and all of them cross, cold, and uncomfortable. The first question, of course, was how to get dry again. They all discussed it earnestly for a few minutes and seemed to find no easy solution. At last, The mouse, who appeared to be a person of some authority, called out, "Sit down, all of you, and listen to me. I'll soon make you dry enough." They all sat down at once, in a large ring, the mouse in the middle. Alice kept her eyes anxiously fixed on it, for she felt certain it must know something worth hearing. "Are you all ready?" said the mouse. "This is the driest thing I know. Silence, if you please. William the Conqueror, whose cause was favored by the Pope, was soon submitted to by the English, who wanted leaders. How are you getting on now, my dear?" the mouse asked, turning to Alice with grave politeness. "As wet as ever," said Alice sadly. "It doesn't seem to dry me at all." "In that case," said the dodo solemnly, rising to its feet, "I move that the meeting adjourn for the adoption of more energetic remedies." "Speak English," said the eaglet. "I don't know what half those long words mean, and what's more, I don't believe you do either." "What I was going to say," said the dodo, in an offended tone, "was that the best thing to get us dry would be a caucus race." "What is a caucus race?" asked Alice. The dodo looked thoughtful for a moment, then said, "The best way to explain it is to do it." So they all stood up and began running about in a great circle. There was no set order, no start, and no finish. They ran when they liked and stopped when they liked, so that no one could ever tell when the race had actually begun or ended. After about half an hour, when everyone was thoroughly muddled and dripping with exertion, the dodo suddenly called out, "The race is over." "But who has won?" asked Alice. "Everybody has won," said the dodo wisely, "and all must have prizes." "But who is to give the prizes?" said the creatures all at once. "Why, she must," said the dodo, pointing to Alice. "Me?" said Alice, quite startled. "I haven't anything with me, only a few sweets in my pocket." She handed them out, one apiece. They all cheered and crowded round to receive them. Then the dodo solemnly presented Alice with her own thimble. "We beg your acceptance of this elegant prize," it said. Alice curtsied and accepted it with as much grace as she could manage. "It's very curious indeed," she thought, "to be given a prize for my own things, the mouse's tail." The creatures sat down again in a circle and begged the mouse to tell his story, for they were beginning to dry at last. "You promised to tell me your history, you know," said Alice politely, "and why you hate cats and dogs." "That is indeed my tale," said the mouse, turning to her with a grave air. "It is a long and a sad one." "It is a long tale, certainly," said Alice, looking down with wonder at the mouse's tail, which was curled neatly into loops upon the ground. "But why do you call it sad?" The mouse frowned. "You're not paying attention. I said tail, not tail." "Oh, I beg your pardon," said Alice meekly. "You do speak so oddly sometimes. Perhaps you'd better not talk," said the mouse. Then, clearing its throat, it began in a trembling voice. "Fury said to a mouse that he met in the house, 'Let us both go to law. I will prosecute you. Come, I'll take no denial. We must have a trial, for really this morning I've nothing to do,' said the mouse to the cur. 'Such a trial, dear sir, with no jury or judge, would be wasting our breath. I'll be judge. I'll be jury,' said cunning old Fury. 'I'll try the whole cause and condemn you to death.' 'You are not attending,' said the mouse sharply, as it turned to leave. 'I beg your pardon,' said Alice softly. 'You had got to the fifth bend, I think.' 'I had not,' cried the mouse, and it began to swim away in anger. 'Oh, please come back,' cried Alice, I didn't mean to offend you." But the mouse only shook its head and hurried off. "I wish Dinah were here," said Alice. She would soon fetch the mouse back again. The mention of Dinah caused quite a stir among the creatures. "Our family always hated cats," said the eaglet coldly. "I vote we change the subject." "Let's all move to shore," said the duck, "for this talk is not suited to a watery atmosphere." They all rose and swam off, leaving Alice alone once more. The little girl sat sorrowfully beside the bank, watching the ripples fade on the surface of the pool. "I wish I hadn't mentioned Dinah," she said. "Nobody seems to like her here, and yet she's the best cat in the world." Then she looked around at the empty water and whispered, "I do wish I hadn't fallen into this curious place at all. Everything here is so very strange." And with that, Alice sat quietly for a time, wondering what would happen next in this land, where meaning and nonsense danced hand in hand. "The rabbit sends in a little billet," was the white rabbit, trotting back again in great haste. He was splendidly dressed this time, with a pair of white kid gloves in one paw and a large fan in the other. He came muttering anxiously to himself, "Oh, the Duchess, the Duchess. She'll be savage if I've kept her waiting." Alice felt so desperate for company that she began timidly, "If you please, sir." The rabbit started violently, dropped his gloves and fan, and scurried off as fast as he could go into the darkness. Alice picked up the fan and gloves, and as she spoke to herself about how odd everything had become, she began once more to shrink, for she had forgotten that she was still holding the magic fan. Quickly she dropped it and found herself again no more than 10 inches high. "Well," she said, "now I'm the right size for going into the garden at last." But when she turned toward the little door, it was gone. The whole long hall and glass table had vanished, and she was now in the open air, wandering along a little path through the wood. Presently, she heard the patter of feet again. Looking up, she saw the white rabbit running toward her, looking quite distracted. "Oh, Mary Ann, what are you doing out here? Run home this moment and fetch me a pair of gloves and a fan. Quick now." Alice was so startled that she ran off in the direction he pointed, without stopping to explain that she wasn't Mary Ann. "He must have mistaken me for his maid," she said as she hurried along. "How surprised he'll be when he finds out who I really am." Soon, she came upon a neat little house with a bright brass plate on the door inscribed, "W. Rabbit." Without hesitation, she ran upstairs in search of the fan and gloves. On a small table near the mirror, she found several pairs of gloves and a small bottle with a label that said simply, "Drink me." "I'll do it," said Alice, "if it makes me grow larger again. It's tiresome being so small." So she took a sip. The effect was immediate and alarming. In a few seconds, she had grown so fast that her head struck the ceiling. She hastily put down the bottle, but it was already too late. "Now I shall frighten the poor rabbit nearly to death," she said, trying to fold herself up as small as she could manage. "Oh, what will become of me now?" Indeed, there was no hope of leaving the room. Her shoulders were pressed against one wall, her knees against another. She could only bend her head a little to look out the window. Soon, she heard the rabbit's voice outside. "Mary Ann! Mary Ann! Fetch me those gloves this instant." Then came the patter of little feet up the stairs. Alice's heart thumped wildly. "Now I shall see what will happen," she thought. "If he tries to come in, I'll frighten him away." The rabbit came up to the door and tried to open it, but the door opened inward, and Alice's elbow was pressed tightly against it. "Why, Mary Ann, what are you doing in there?" He tried to push, but could not get in. "I'll have to go round and get in through the window," he muttered. "That you won't," thought Alice, and as soon as she saw his little head peep in through the window, she gave it a sharp push with her hand. There was a crash of broken glass, and the rabbit's angry voice cried out, "Pat, Pat, where are you?" Then another voice, unfamiliar and gruff, replied, "Sure then, what's the matter now, Your Honor?" "Here, come and help me out of this," said the rabbit. "She's stuck inside my house, a giant girl filling up the whole room." "Well, what am I to do, Your Honor?" said Pat. "Go and fetch Bill," said the rabbit. Soon Alice heard another small voice. "That's right, Bill, fetch the ladder." She guessed by the sounds that they were bringing something to the roof. Then the rabbit called, "Now then, Bill, up you go through the chimney." "Oh, so that's their plan," thought Alice. "Well, they'll see what happens." She waited until she heard a rustling sound just inside the chimney, then gave one tremendous kick. "Catch him, you by the hedge," cried the rabbit's voice. Then silence, followed by a chorus of voices. "There goes Bill, flying up like a skyrocket." Alice laughed so much she could hardly speak, but the rabbit called angrily, "We'll burn the house down." "Oh, no, you won't," cried Alice, and immediately added aloud, "If you dare, I'll send Dinah after you." There was a dead silence after this. Finally, the rabbit said in a trembling voice, "Better bring a cartload of pebbles." A shower of small stones came rattling in through the window. Some of them struck Alice's face. She noticed that wherever they landed, they turned into little cakes. "Aha," said Alice. "Perhaps if I eat one of these, I shall get smaller again." She put one to her lips, and in a moment she began to shrink rapidly. As soon as she was small enough to slip through the door, she ran out of the house and found a crowd of small animals and birds waiting outside. They all began shouting and throwing sticks at her, but Alice darted away into the thickest part of the wood and soon found herself safe once more. "The first thing I've got to do," said Alice to herself, "is to grow to my proper size again, and the second thing is to find my way into that lovely garden." She looked around. Near her grew a large mushroom, about as tall as she was. She stood on tiptoe and peeped over the edge. Upon the top sat a large blue caterpillar, smoking a long hookah and taking not the slightest notice of her or of anything else. Alice stared up at the caterpillar for some time in silence. At last, the creature slowly removed the hookah from its mouth and addressed her in a languid, sleepy voice. "Who are you?" it said. This was not an encouraging beginning, Alice answered, rather shyly. I hardly know, sir, just at present. At least, I knew who I was when I got up this morning, but I think I must have been changed several times since then." "What do you mean by that?" asked the caterpillar sternly. "Explain yourself." "I can't explain myself, I'm afraid, sir," said Alice, "because I'm not myself. You see?" "I don't see," said the caterpillar. "I'm afraid I can't put it more clearly," Alice replied politely, "for I can't understand it myself to begin with. And being so many different sizes in a single day is very confusing." "It isn't," said the caterpillar. "Well, perhaps you haven't found it so yet," said Alice. "But when you have to turn into a chrysalis, you know, someday you will, and then into a butterfly. I should think you'll feel a little queer, won't you?" "Not a bit," said the caterpillar. "Well, perhaps your feelings are different," said Alice. "All I know is, it would feel very strange to me." "You," said the caterpillar contemptuously. "Who are you?" This question again took Alice by surprise, and being quite at a loss for words, she turned away in confusion. "Come back," said the caterpillar after her. "I've something important to say." This sounded promising, so Alice turned back. "Keep your temper," said the caterpillar. "Is that all?" asked Alice, swallowing her irritation. "No," said the caterpillar. There was silence for a few minutes as the caterpillar puffed lazily on its hookah until at last it spoke again. "So you think you're changed, do you?" "I'm afraid I am, sir," said Alice. "I can't remember things as I used to, and my size keeps changing every minute. I can't seem to keep to one shape." "What things can't you remember?" asked the caterpillar. "Well, I've tried to say, 'How doth the little busy bee?' But it all came out different," said Alice sadly. "I think my memory's gone. Repeat, 'You are old, Father William,'" said the caterpillar. Alice folded her hands and began. "You are old, Father William," the young man said, "and your hair has become very white, and yet you incessantly stand on your head. Do you think, at your age, it is right?" "In my youth," Father William replied to his son, "I feared it might injure the brain. But now that I'm perfectly sure I have none, why, I do it again and again." "You are old," said the youth, "as I mentioned before, and have grown most uncommonly fat. Yet you turned a back somersault in at the door. Pray, what is the reason of that?" "In my youth," said the sage, as he shook his gray locks, "I kept all my limbs very supple by the use of this ointment. 1 shilling the box. Allow me to sell you a couple." "You are old," said the youth, "and your jaws are too weak for anything tougher than sweat. Yet you finished the goose with the bones in the beak. Pray, how did you manage to do it?" "In my youth," said his father, "I took to the law and argued each case with my wife, and the muscular strength that it gave to my jaw has lasted the rest of my life." "You are old," said the youth. "One would hardly suppose that your eye was as steady as ever, yet you balanced an eel on the end of your nose. What made you so awfully clever?" "I have answered 3 questions, and that is enough," said his father. "Don't give yourself airs. Do you think I can listen all day to such stuff? Be off, or I'll kick you downstairs." "That is not said right," said the caterpillar. "Not quite right, I'm afraid," said Alice timidly. "Some of the words seem to come wrong." "It is wrong from beginning to end," said the caterpillar decidedly, and there was silence for some minutes. At last, the caterpillar took the hookah out of its mouth again and said, "So you think you're changed, do you?" "I'm afraid I am," said Alice. "I can't keep the same size for 10 minutes together." "What size do you want to be?" asked the caterpillar. "Oh, I don't care much which," said Alice quickly. "Only one doesn't like changing so often, you know." "I don't know," said the caterpillar. Alice said nothing. She had never been so contradicted in her life before. The caterpillar seemed to be making her quite cross. "At present, you're content with your size?" it asked. "Well, I should like to be a little larger, if you don't mind," said Alice. 3 inches is such a dreadful height to be." "It is a very good height indeed," said the caterpillar angrily, rearing itself up straight as it spoke, for it was exactly 3 inches high. "It is a fine height," it repeated proudly. Alice said meekly, "Yes, I'm sure it is for you, but I'm not used to it." "You'll get used to it in time," said the caterpillar, and put the hookah back into its mouth. This time, Alice waited patiently until the caterpillar chose to speak again. After a few minutes, it took the hookah from its mouth, yawned once or twice, and shook itself. Then it slid down from the mushroom and crawled away into the grass, merely remarking as it went, One side will make you grow taller, and the other side will make you grow shorter. One side of what? The other side of what? Thought Alice. Of the mushroom, said the caterpillar, as if it had heard her question and was already vanishing from sight. Alice remained standing before the mushroom, looking at it carefully on all sides to find which was which. At last, she broke off a piece from each hand and tried to remember which she held in which. Next moment, her chin struck her foot, for she was shrinking so rapidly that she barely had time to nibble at the other piece before she disappeared altogether. At last, she found her natural height once more, though it took several bites, and she grew sometimes too tall, sometimes too small, before getting it quite right. When she was, at last, her proper size again, she said thoughtfully, "That's quite enough of growing and shrinking for one day. Now for the garden." And she set off once more through the wood, carrying in her hands the 2 pieces of mushroom, ready for any size-changing adventures that might come. For a while, Alice wandered through the forest, still holding the 2 pieces of mushroom in her hands. "One piece will make me grow," she said, "and the other will make me shrink. So I must be careful how I use them." Soon she came upon a little open place in the woods, where a large house stood, its chimneys shaped like fish, and its roof covered with thick smoke. A loud, endless sneezing came from within, mixed with the sound of crashing crockery, and a woman shouting, "There's certainly someone in distress." "There," said Alice. She went up to the door and knocked timidly. A footman in livery opened it, a large, round-faced man with the face of a fish. He wore a powdered wig and held a letter sealed with a royal crown. Another footman, also in livery, but with the face of a frog, sat on the ground, yawning lazily. The fish footman handed him the letter, saying in a solemn voice, "For the Duchess, an invitation from the Queen to play croquet." The frog footman repeated in the same tone, "From the Queen, an invitation for the Duchess to play croquet," and both bowed deeply until their curls touched. Alice couldn't help laughing. She waited until the exchange was over, then stepped forward timidly. "Please," she said, "how am I to get in?" The frog footman simply pointed at the door with his thumb. "I shall sit here," he said, "till tomorrow, perhaps longer." Alice sighed and pushed the door open herself. She stepped into a kitchen filled with smoke. A cook stood before a great cauldron, stirring it with all her might. The air was thick with pepper, so thick that both the Duchess and her baby were sneezing violently. There was no greeting, so Alice began bravely, "If you please, your grace." "Chop off her head," screamed the Duchess, without looking up. Alice was too startled to speak. The cook threw a plate across the room. It narrowly missed the Duchess and smashed against the wall. "Please mind what you're doing," cried Alice, jumping to her feet in terror. "Oh, there goes another one." The Duchess only grinned. "Tut, child. Everything's pepper here," she said. "Even the cook's temper." The baby howled louder than ever. The Duchess rocked it violently, singing in a harsh voice, "Speak roughly to your little boy, and beat him when he sneezes. He only does it to annoy, because he knows it teases." Then the cook and the chorus joined in. "Wow, wow, wow. I'm sure that song would make anybody sneeze," thought Alice. She was growing more and more uncomfortable. When the lullaby ended, the Duchess suddenly thrust the squalling baby into Alice's arms. "Here, you may nurse it a bit if you like," she said. "I must go and get ready to play croquet with the Queen." And with that, she swept out of the room. Alice caught the baby carefully, though it twisted and snorted like a piglet. "If you're going to turn into a pig, my dear," she said softly, "I'll have nothing to do with you." The child sneezed and gave a short grunt. Alice carried it outside into the open air. The poor thing snorted again, and as she looked at it more closely, its little nose had quite turned up, and its eyes had grown small and beady. "Don't grunt again," she said sternly, "or I shall know what you are." It grunted once more. "There, now." "I told you so," said Alice. She set it down, and it trotted calmly away into the wood. "If it had grown up," said Alice thoughtfully, "it would have made a dreadfully ugly child, but it makes quite a handsome pig." She had not gone far when she noticed a large grin hanging in the air among the branches. A moment later, she saw that it was attached to a cat, a large cat with a face both friendly and eerie. "Cheshire Puss," she said timidly. "Would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here?" "That depends a good deal on where you want to get to," said the cat. "I don't much care where," said Alice. "Then it doesn't matter which way you go," said the cat. "So long as I get somewhere," Alice added by way of explanation. "Oh, you're sure to do that," said the cat. "If only you walk long enough." Alice thought that made sense. "So what sort of people live about here?" "In that direction," said the cat, waving its paw toward the right, "lives a hatter, and in that direction," pointing to the left, "lives a March hare. Visit either you like. They're both mad, but I don't want to go among mad people," Alice protested. "Oh, you can't help that," said the cat. "We're all mad here." "I'm mad. You're mad." "How do you know I'm mad?" asked Alice. "You must be," said the cat, "or you wouldn't have come here." The cat grinned wider. "Do you play croquet with the Queen today?" it asked. "I should like it very much," said Alice, "but I haven't been invited yet." "You'll see her soon enough," said the cat, and vanished. Alice waited a little, hoping it would appear again. After a minute, the grin appeared first, then the rest of the cat followed. "Did you say pig or fig?" the cat asked suddenly. "I said pig," Alice replied. "I thought so," said the cat, and vanished once more, this time quite slowly, beginning with the tip of its tail and ending with the grin, which lingered last of all in the air. "I've often seen a cat without a grin," said Alice, "but never a grin without a cat. It's the most curious thing I ever saw." She walked on until she came to the house of the March hare. It was a large house, shaped like a teapot, and the chimneys were shaped like rabbit ears. Alice looked at it for a moment. "I suppose the hatter would be madder," she said, "but since it's May, perhaps the March hare won't be so bad after all." She approached the gate, nibbling a little piece of mushroom to make herself just tall enough to reach the doorknob, and stepped boldly toward her next adventure. There was a table set out under a tree in front of the house, and the March hare and the hatter were having tea at it. A dormouse sat between them, fast asleep, and the other two were resting their elbows on him, using him as a cushion and talking over his head. The table was a long one, but the three were all crowded together at one corner. "There's no room. There's no room," they cried out when they saw Alice coming. "There's plenty of room," said Alice indignantly, and she sat down in a large armchair at one end. "Have some wine," said the March hare. Alice looked round the table, but there was nothing on it but tea. "I don't see any wine," she said. "There isn't any," said the March hare. "Then it wasn't very civil of you to offer it," said Alice. "It wasn't very civil of you to sit down without being invited." said the March Hare. "I didn't know it was your table," said Alice. "It's laid for a great many more than 3. Your hair wants cutting," said the Hatter. He had been looking at Alice for some time, with great curiosity. "You should learn not to make personal remarks," said Alice severely. "It's very rude." The Hatter opened his eyes very wide on hearing this, but all he said was, "Why is a raven like a writing desk?" "I think I can guess that," said Alice. "Do you mean that you think you can find out the answer?" asked the March Hare. "Exactly so," said Alice. "Then you should say what you mean," the March Hare went on. "I do," Alice replied quickly. "At least I mean what I say. That's the same thing, you know." "Not the same thing a bit," said the Hatter. "You might just as well say that I see what I eat is the same as I eat what I see. You might just as well say," added the March Hare, "that I like what I get is the same as I get what I like. You might just as well say," added the Dormouse, who seemed to be talking in his sleep, "that I breathe when I sleep is the same as I sleep when I breathe." "It is the same thing with you," said the Hatter, and the conversation dropped. The Hatter was the first to speak again. "What day of the month is it?" he said, turning to Alice. He had taken his watch out of his pocket and was looking at it uneasily, shaking it every now and then, and holding it to his ear. Alice considered. "The 4th," she said. "2 days wrong," sighed the Hatter. "I told you butter wouldn't suit the works." "It was the best butter," the March Hare replied humbly. "Yes, but some crumbs must have got in as well," the Hatter said. "You shouldn't have put it in with the bread knife." The March Hare took the watch and looked at it gloomily. "It was the best butter," he repeated. Alice had been looking over his shoulder with some curiosity. "What a funny watch," she remarked. "It tells the day of the month, but not what o'clock it is." "Why should it?" muttered the Hatter. "Does your watch tell you what year it is?" "Of course not," said Alice promptly. "But that's because it stays the same year for such a long time together, which is just the case with mine," said the Hatter. Alice felt dreadfully puzzled. The Hatter's remark seemed to have no sort of meaning in it, and yet it was clearly intended to be full of logic. "I don't quite understand," she said, politely. "The Dormouse is asleep again," said the Hatter, and he poured a little hot tea upon its nose. The Dormouse shook its head impatiently and said, without opening its eyes, Of course. Just what I was going to remark myself. Have you guessed the riddle yet?" the Hatter said, turning to Alice again. "No, I give it up," said Alice. "What's the answer?" "I haven't the slightest idea," said the Hatter. "Nor I," said the March Hare. Alice sighed. "Then you shouldn't waste time asking riddles that have no answers." "If you knew time as well as I do," said the Hatter, "you wouldn't talk about wasting it." "It's him." "I don't know what you mean," said Alice. "Of course you don't," the Hatter said, shaking his head. "I dare say you never even spoke to time." "Perhaps not," Alice cautiously replied. "But I know I have to beat time when I learn music." "Ah, that accounts for it," said the Hatter. "He won't stand beating. Now, if you only kept on good terms with him, he'd do almost anything you liked with the clock. For instance, suppose it were 9 o'clock in the morning, just time to begin lessons. You'd only have to whisper a hint to time, and round goes the clock in a twinkling. 1:30, time for lunch." "That would be grand, certainly," said Alice thoughtfully. "But then, I shouldn't be hungry for it, you know." "Not at first, perhaps," said the Hatter, but you could keep it at 1:30 as long as you liked." "That's what the matter is," said the Hatter with a sigh. "It's always tea time here. We've no time to wash the cups between whiles." "So, you keep moving round the table, do you?" asked Alice. "Exactly so," said the Hatter, "as the things get used up. But what happens when you come to the beginning again?" Alice ventured. "Suppose we change the subject," the March Hare interrupted, yawning. "I'm getting tired of this. I vote the young lady tell us a story." "I'm afraid I don't know one," said Alice. "Then the Dormouse shall," they both cried. "Wake up, Dormouse," and they pinched it on both sides at once. The Dormouse slowly opened its eyes. "I wasn't asleep," it said in a hoarse, feeble voice. "I heard every word you fellows were saying." "Tell us a story," said the March Hare. "Yes, please do," added Alice eagerly. "And be quick about it," said the Hatter, "or you'll be asleep again before it's done." "Once upon a time," said the Dormouse, "there were 3 little sisters, and their names were Elsie, Lacey, and Tilly, and they lived at the bottom of a well." "What did they live on?" said Alice, who always took a keen interest in food. "They lived on treacle," said the Dormouse, after thinking a minute. "They couldn't have done that, you know," Alice gently remarked. "They'd have been ill." "So they were," said the Dormouse. "Very ill." Alice tried to picture it. "But why did they live at the bottom of a well?" "Take some more tea," the March Hare interrupted, offering her a plate with a fresh cup. "I've had nothing yet," Alice replied indignantly, "so I can't take more." "You mean you can't take less?" said the Hatter. "It's very easy to take more than nothing." "Nobody asked your opinion," said Alice. "Who's making personal remarks now?" the Hatter triumphantly asked. Alice didn't know what to say to that, so she poured herself a little tea and turned back to the Dormouse. "I don't think that well had any treacle in it at all," she said. "There was treacle," said the Dormouse. "They were learning to draw, you know." "What did they draw?" said Alice. "Anything worth drawing?" "Treacle," said the Dormouse, "and they drew all manner of things. Everything that begins with an M, such as mousetraps, and the moon, and memory, and muchness. You know you say things are much of a muchness. Did you ever see such a thing as a drawing of muchness? Really, now you ask me," said Alice. "I don't think—" "Then you shouldn't talk," said the Hatter. This was more than Alice could bear. She got up in great disgust and walked off. At the moment she looked back once. The Hatter and the March Hare were trying to put the Dormouse into the teapot. "At any rate, I'll never go there again," she said. "It's the stupidest tea party I ever was at in all my life." As she said this, she noticed a little door in the tree nearby. She stepped through it and found herself, at last, in the beautiful garden she had longed to enter since the beginning of her adventure. A large rose tree stood near the garden entrance. The roses growing on it were white, but there were 3 gardeners at it, busily painting them red. Alice thought this a very curious thing, and she went nearer to watch them. Just as she came up, she heard one of them say, "Look out now, Five. Don't go splashing paint over me like that." "I couldn't help it," said Five, in a sulky tone. "Seven jogged my elbow." "That's right, Five," said Seven. "Always lay the blame on others." "You'd better not talk," said Five. "I heard the Queen say only yesterday that she'd have you beheaded." "What for?" said the one who had spoken first. "That's none of your business, too," said Seven. "Yes, it is his business," said Five, "and I'll tell him. It was for bringing the cook tulip roots instead of onions." Seven flung down his brush. Well, of all the unjust things, when his eye chanced to fall upon Alice, as she stood watching them, and he checked himself suddenly. The others looked round also, and all of them bowed low. "Would you tell me," said Alice, a little timidly, "why you are painting those roses?" 5 and 7 said nothing, but looked at 2. 2 began, in a low voice, "Why, the fact is, you see, miss, this here ought to have been a red rose tree, and we put a white one in by mistake. And if the Queen was to find it out, we should all have our heads cut off, you know. So, you see, miss, we're doing our best, before she comes, to..." At this moment, 5, who had been anxiously looking across the garden, called out, "The Queen! The Queen!" And the 3 gardeners at once threw themselves flat upon their faces. There was a sound of many footsteps, and Alice looked round, eager to see the Queen. The royal procession first came 10 soldiers carrying clubs. They were all shaped like the 3 gardeners, flat and oblong, with their hands and feet at the corners. Next came 10 courtiers. These were ornamented all over with diamonds, and walked 2 and 2, as the soldiers did. After these came the royal children. There were 10 of them, and the little dears came jumping merrily along, hand in hand, in couples. They were all ornamented with hearts. Next came the guests, mostly kings and queens, and among them Alice recognized the White Rabbit. He was talking eagerly to a king and queen of hearts, and Alice guessed that he was serving as herald. Then followed the Knave of Hearts, carrying the king's crown on a crimson velvet cushion, and last of all came the king and queen of hearts themselves. They were a great crowd, and Alice thought she had never seen such curious people before. Some of them were animals, some were birds, and the whole pack of cards seemed alive and moving in all directions. When the procession came opposite to Alice, they all stopped and looked at her, and the Queen said severely, "Who is this?" She said it to the Knave of Hearts, who only bowed and smiled in reply. "Idiot," said the Queen, tossing her head impatiently. Then, turning to Alice, she asked, "What's your name, child?" "My name is Alice, so please your Majesty," said Alice very politely. But she added to herself, "Why, they're only a pack of cards, after all. I needn't be afraid of them." "And who are these?" said the Queen, pointing to the 3 gardeners, who lay prostrate upon their faces. "How should I know?" said Alice, surprised at her own courage. "It's no business of mine." The Queen turned crimson with fury, and after glaring at her for a moment like a wild beast, screamed, "Off with her head!" "Off? Nonsense," said Alice very loudly and decidedly, and the Queen was silent. The King laid his hand upon her arm and said timidly, "Consider, my dear, she is only a child." The Queen turned away angrily and said to the knave, "Turn them over." The knave did so very carefully, and the 3 gardeners instantly jumped up and began bowing to the King, the Queen, the royal children, and everybody else. "Leave off that," screamed the Queen. "You make me giddy. What have you been doing here?" "May it please your Majesty," said 2, in a very humble tone. "We were trying..." "I see," said the Queen, who had meanwhile been examining the roses. Off with their heads, and the procession moved on, 3 of the soldiers remaining behind to execute the unfortunate gardeners, who ran to Alice for protection. "You shan't be beheaded," said Alice, and she put them into a large flower pot that stood near. The 3 soldiers wandered off, and after a while, the rest of the procession moved on, and Alice went along with them, curious to see what would happen next. The croquet ground. The Queen turned away angrily and called out, "Can you play croquet?" The soldiers were silent and looked at Alice. Yes, shouted Alice. Come on then, roared the Queen, and Alice joined the procession, wondering very much what would happen next. It's a very fine day, said a timid voice at her side. She was walking by the White Rabbit, who looked anxiously at her face. Very, said Alice. Where's the Duchess? Hush, hush, said the rabbit, and he looked over his shoulder as he spoke, then raised himself upon tiptoe, put his mouth close to her ear, and whispered, She's under sentence of execution. What for? Said Alice. Did you say, what a pity? The rabbit asked. No, I didn't, said Alice. I don't think it's at all a pity. I said what for? She boxed the Queen's ears. The rabbit began. Alice gave a little scream of laughter. Oh, hush, the rabbit whispered in a frightened tone. The Queen will hear you. See, she's coming. The Queen was indeed close behind, shouting, Get to your places. The game begins. The croquet ground was a strange sight. The balls were live hedgehogs, the mallets were live flamingos, and the soldiers had to double themselves up and stand on their hands and feet to make the arches. The difficulty was that the flamingo would not keep still. It would twist itself round and look up in Alice's face with such a puzzled expression that she could hardly help laughing, and when she got its head down and was going to give the hedgehog a blow with it, the hedgehog would unroll itself and crawl away into another part of the ground. Besides all this, there was generally a ridge or a furrow in the way wherever she wanted to send the hedgehog to, and as the doubled-up soldiers were always getting up and walking off to other parts of the ground, Alice soon came to the conclusion that it was a very difficult game indeed. The players all played at once, without waiting for turns, quarreling all the while, and fighting for the hedgehogs. The Queen was in a furious passion, and went stamping about, shouting, Off with his head, or off with her head, about once in a minute. Alice began to feel very uneasy. She had never been so near losing her temper before. The Cheshire Cat appears as she was looking about for some way of escape and wondering whether she could manage to slip away without being seen, when she noticed a curious appearance in the air. It puzzled her very much at first, but after watching it a minute or two, she made it out to be a grin, and she said to herself, It's the Cheshire Cat. Now I shall have somebody to talk to. How are you getting on? Said the cat, as soon as there was mouth enough for it to speak with. Alice waited till the eyes appeared, and then nodded. It's no use speaking to it till its ears have come, or at least one of them. In another minute, the whole head appeared, and then Alice put down her flamingo and began an account of the game, feeling very glad she had someone to listen to her. The cat seemed to think that there was enough of it now visible to be spoken to, and so she went on. I don't think they play at all fairly, said Alice, and they all quarrel so dreadfully one can't hear oneself speak, and they don't seem to have any rules in particular. How do you like the Queen? Said the cat. Not at all, said Alice. She's so extremely... Just then, she noticed that the Queen was close behind her, listening, so she went on. Likely to win, that it's hardly worthwhile finishing the game. The Queen smiled and passed on. Who are you talking to? Said the King, going up to Alice. It's a friend of mine, a Cheshire Cat, said Alice. I don't like the look of it at all, said the King. However, it may kiss my hand if it likes. I'd rather not, the cat remarked. Don't be impertinent, said the King, and don't look at me like that. He got behind Alice as he spoke. A cat may look at a king, said Alice. I've read that in some book. but I don't remember where." "Well, it must be removed," said the king very decidedly, and he called to the queen, who was passing at that moment. "My dear, I wish you'd have this cat removed." The queen had only one way of settling all difficulties, great or small. "Off with his head," she said, without even looking round. "I'll fetch the executioner myself," said the king eagerly, and he hurried off. A vanishing verdict. Alice thought she might as well go and see how the cat was getting on, for she heard a great deal of noise and confusion in the distance. When she arrived, the executioner was arguing with the king and queen, who were all talking at once, while all the rest were silent and looking very uncomfortable. The executioner's argument was that you couldn't cut off a head unless there was a body to cut it off from, that he had never done such a thing before, and he wasn't going to begin at his time of life. The king's argument was that anything that had a head could be beheaded, and that you weren't to talk nonsense. The queen's argument was that if something wasn't done about it, in less than no time, she'd have everybody executed, all round. It appeared to Alice that there was no reason in any of them, and she went off to find her hedgehog. By the time she got back, the cat had vanished entirely, so the king and the executioner ran wildly up and down looking for it, while the rest went back to their game.